United States is in the middle of the worst drug crisis in our history. Fueled by fentanyl and other opioids, it's taking the lives of 1,500 Americans each week. It's also destroying countless family members in the process. 2 stories of beauty from the ashes, today on The Mom View. Welcome to The Mom View. The Mom View is a program for moms from all walks of life. We take a common sense approach to the issues that affect our families. Today's program touches thousands of homes every year. The illegal drugs flowing into the United States, mostly from Mexico, my country, which is very, very sad and heartbroken, right? It's hard to hear the Mexican president say, it's not our fault, it's their kids taking it. They should raise better children.
So there's a major crisis with the border crossings with the fentanyl. I mean, the drugs
have always been a problem.
Not to excuse them, but they've always been a problem.
Yes, for
but
sure.
now it's like stepped up to the point where this is a lethal drug that is
50 times more potent than heroin. 50 times more potent.
I thought most of it was coming from China. I mean, at least that's what I heard.
But it's coming
from
China
when-
to Mexico. They're all
Mexico
kind of in
Mexico
the-
to here.
Yeah. Yeah, Mexico's pushing it through.
Right,
It's the
Mexico
border.
is the border. The
But the
bridge.
fentanyl is from China.
Fentanyl is coming from
Yeah,
China.
Right.
So there were some statistics when I was looking these up. I was like totally shocked. Now all these statistics are from 2022 because they did all these surveys. It's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
But in 2022, 73,654 people died from fentanyl overdose. In the U.S., it's more than double the deaths since 2019. So it's continuing to increase. And then why is fentanyl so dangerous? And when I read this, I was like, I mean, I know because people were saying, I've listened to law enforcement, I've listened to parents. You can touch this thing.
Oh, yeah, paramedics were like...
And that's it. If you even
dying.
touch it, you're dying. And I mean, that's just crazy insane. So it says fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. So everybody's like, what is fentanyl? A synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times stronger, as we said, than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine.
Wow.
So if you've ever had morphine, think about that. I mean,
That's why it's so lethal.
it is.
so lethal.
It is. And so what's happening is kids are getting a hold of these drugs
That look like
that
candy.
look like normal. Yeah, I mean,
Or
I
other
saw
other
them.
pills, right?
I
Like,
saw
they look
them.
like,
Yes.
oxycodone or...
Yeah.
Or
Well, they're
Xanax.
taking Xanax.
Xanax.
That's the big one.
Yes.
They're taking Xanax to sometimes to get through to classes. You know, they're studying. They got
High
sleep.
anxiety, whatever.
Exactly. And then the next thing you know, they're dead.
Yeah, that's
Because
exactly. Sad story. This is exactly what happened to my young cousin. He took a fentanyl-laced Xanax, and in his late 20s, he was gone. So when we hear, this mom's story, it's heartbreaking. But kids are taking these drugs. They don't know that they're laced. The drug dealers don't care.
Of course they don't.
And kids are dying at record numbers. I mean, lives are just snuffed out.
I think there's 2 really important issues here, and one is this fentanyl is incredibly dangerous, worse than any other drug that's out there. And the second part is why are more and more kids going to drugs? And just to survive, it seems like. And we're not talking about hard drugs. We're talking about they're going and getting Xanax or over the counter drugs and just to survive. And then of course there are the hard narcotics.
I mean, there's been cases where kids didn't even know they were taking drugs. They thought it was candy. Someone offered them candy, right? It comes to the point where we tell our children, don't take anything from strangers, right? Because some of
Then
them
they're
didn't
taking them
even
from their
know.
friends.
taking
But
it
also,
from
when
their
you have
friends.
the medical pharmaceutical companies are allowed to pitch products to consumers, we're one of the only, there's 2 countries, it's our country and I think it's Australia or New Zealand, where pharmaceutical companies are allowed to pitch drugs through TV. So, I mean, they're seeing it every day. They're seeing it through social media. They're seeing it on through TV programs. They're seeing it in commercials. So they're being inundated with drug yourself.
So drug dealers are just sharing it on Instagram too.
Yes.
I mean, this
Oh,
is
wow.
just like
Yes.
everybody.
TikTok.
Right.
It's on TikTok.
So it's like they're desensitized to it and
You
they're
know,
becoming comfortable.
coming up, we have a mother who lost her only son to to fentanyl-laced pills, and she will tell us her story.
Do you think America is having an identity crisis?
Yes, very much so. My people perish for lack of knowledge.
There's a lot of targeting of conservative children.
That they're coming after the children. It's like, you know what? We have to do something. This is war.
Professors and students are trained in a particular kind of way, and that there's indoctrination that takes place that you're not aware of.
All the curriculum was dumbed down, and we moved away from teaching knowledge, facts, and information, and instead indoctrinated kids with attitudes, values, and beliefs that most parents don't believe and don't want their children believing.
The globalists that want to reshape the globe are a elite group, a small group of gatekeeper elites.
Our children are being formed, they're being shaped by a system that is actually designed to turn them away from God, to turn them away from the principles that are at the foundation of our country, really even to turn them against their families.
That the condition of the land is always directly related to the condition of God's people's hearts. And so we're now maybe facing national judgment.
Now what we're up against is the establishment. We see that we need to have some kind of a healthy revolution. We would always say a non-violent revolution, but there has to be a revolution. Otherwise we're going to go down, because these foxes are part of a world order. They're globalists, they're not Americans, and they'll sink this ship.
Just think of the power of those 3 words, just a mom. You are fighting for something that means more to you than anything in the world, your children.
There are patriots like you and me fighting against the globalist agenda in order to preserve our republic. I want you to meet them and be inspired. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome back to the Mom View. Stephanie Turner is a mom of 4, 1 son and 3 daughters. Sadly, her son Tucker can no longer join the family for outings or dinners or holidays. Stephanie lost Tucker in September of 2021 to fentanyl poisoning. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, every time I see her, and I know that with Kimberly too, we feel bad, but you say don't feel bad because you're making a difference all across America on behalf of your son.
This is a story, and if we don't tell it, if the families who are impacted don't have a platform, don't tell it, don't speak about it, then we won't know what's going on and the dangers that's happening, because this is a very common, the #1 cause of death we're talking.
Oh my goodness.
So it's very, very scary to think that kids have a higher chance of dying from fentanyl than suicide, gun violence, car accidents combined.
You know, it's stories like this that I always love to highlight, because you take the pain of the situation and then you turn it into power to help other parents so that they don't have to deal with this situation. And that's a gift that you're giving, that you've dedicated your life to.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about Tucker?
Yes, Tucker's my firstborn, my only son, and I think as a mom, we all know our firstborns are very special. We learn everything with them, figuring out parenting and motherhood, and he was born with just an adventurous spirit. Him and I have a very close relationship. That was something that from day one, he was always a mama's boy, for sure, and he was joined by 3 sisters, so he was a proud big brother, a protective brother of his sisters, and just, you know, your average boy, all boy. I say that boys will jump out of a tree and realize they shouldn't have jumped after they broke their ankle.
That's very true.
Kind of like I might not want to jump. I might hurt myself. So boys take risk. That sometimes I think that girls maybe not as much. But Tucker, after he had gotten out of high school, he was 18 years old, and kind of that season of his life of what do I do next? Some of his friends were going off to college. His dad had a construction company, so he's working there, just trying to find what's next for him in his life. And he had went to a New Year's Eve party. And when he came home from that New Year's Eve party, he told me that he was offered a pill at the party, and he took it. And I said, what was it? And he said, Xanax. And now I want us to kind of all go back to 2021. COVID had just kind of ended. We ended COVID year.
Right.
And I had never heard the word illicit fentanyl. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know there was such a thing as press pills. I had no knowledge of it. Didn't know it was 50 times stronger than heroin. If my son came home from a party and said, Mom, I tried heroin, as a mother, your response would have been totally different.
Right.
And then fast forward, he had a broken hand, and over the next 10 weeks, he on and off was taking Xanax, and it was fentanyl-laced pills. And I did not know, and he had just turned 19. So now we're mid-March. It was March 13th. He had just turned 19. And I woke up in the morning, and I heard a gurgling noise in my media room. And when I went up there, and he was in a fentanyl poisoning state. And what happens with fentanyl that I think it's really important that we understand, unlike any other drug, the dependency that it creates in the body, and it impacts the opioid receptors, and it sits on the fentanyl or on our opioid receptors in our brain. That's what controls your ability to breathe. So if you have a lethal amount of fentanyl in your system, it's on those receptors. So there was nothing that you could do to make him breathe again. I didn't know what was going on. His lips were blue. He was in a seizure state. I screamed for my husband to call 911, and thankfully he did immediately, and paramedics came and administered
Narcan?
Yes, the life-saving opioid antagonist, naloxone, or the brand name is Narcan, and that pushes the fentanyl off of those receptors. So he started breathing again. And from there, he went to ICU, and that's when I learned what fentanyl was. And that's when he learned what fentanyl was. So there's a little window of time that, parents didn't have this knowledge. I didn't have that to give him and tell him, warn him of these dangers. And I say, as a mother, you say, put on your seatbelt, look both ways. You teach them the things, the ways you raise them. And I didn't have the tools to safeguard him from this poison. From there, Tucker went to a treatment center. He actually went to 2 treatment centers over the next 6 months. And when he got out, he was doing so well, and he was living on his own, working full time with his dad, training for a triathlon.
Yeah.
And it was a few days before his triathlon, he was feeling anxious. He had told me he was feeling anxious again. Him and his girlfriend had broke up. It was just life stuff, a 19-and-a-half-year-old boy dealing with 19-year-old boy things. And what I didn't understand about fentanyl is just how addictive. It's how it impacts the body. And the next time they feel stress, or you'll hear people who have been an were an alcoholic, and then a parent died, and then they started drinking again, or triggers. And that's what happens with fentanyl. If they have a trigger, so Tucker was triggered, and he reached out for another pill. And I saw him that night. He came to my house, and he had just went to the gym, and I sent him home with some food. He said, I don't think I'm eating enough. My triathlon's coming up. And I walked him out to the car, and I told him that I love him and I'm so proud of him. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, my son is about to do a triathlon in 3 days. And 6 months ago, I didn't even know if he was going to be here. And he looked so healthy and so vibrant. And on the outside, I thought we had beat this evilness, and we were on to better days. And I just didn't know. And I also didn't know that this is what they feel. Can we talk about the stigma behind that? And that we can't say, I feel like using again. So often there's that guilt and shame. It's such a low frequency for people to be in. And that was Tucker. And I think it's important to understand with fentanyl, they take a pill, they go to sleep. They don't know what happens to them. It's not something where you notice, oh, my kid is acting different. They're sleeping. And he took a pill, so he left that night, and he took a pill. His roommate was out of town. And I think that's very telling. You hear it time and time again when they don't think anyone's around. No one will know. I'll just take this. He just wanted a good night's sleep. And he took that pill, and he did not wake up. And
so sad.
So that
tragic.
And that morning when we were trying to find where he wasn't answering his phone. I did not feel that he was in danger. I'm like, I just saw him last night. You know, I had lived kind of nervous through that time, through his treatment of what tomorrow might bring, but I didn't feel like that. I felt like he's okay. I just saw him last night, and I drove to his house, and the police were there, and a detective was putting on blue gloves, and that's how I learned. So very, very life altering. And really from there, what happened is I just wanted to tell people about it. I wanted to tell Tucker's story so others could tell their children and be warned. And I started talking about it, and I posted about it on social media. And what happened was a flood of parents who were reaching out.
You found a whole community
Yes.
of moms all across the country that were looking for help, one another, that were discovering that had lost, that had been touched.
Or have kids in addiction. So, you know, like parents don't know what to do.
Isn't it like everyone can say now at this point that somehow someone in their family or family member or a neighbor has been touched by fentanyl?
Yes, 32% of Americans know someone personally who has lost a life to fentanyl poisoning.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that's a high number.
That is a real number.
Yeah, on average, we're losing about 180 to 200 people a day, which is comparable to a 737 airplane. So I want us to picture if an airplane was crashing every single day. That's what's happening.
You'd certainly hear that story.
Absolutely. You would hear that story. And that's just the death rate. But what we know, the addiction, it's so strong and it grabs hold, and 80% of people relapse within 1 year of treatment. So not only are the airplane dying, how many more people are being exposed to it who now in 1 more year could lose their life? And this is another shocking number that bothers me so much that we don't hear about. An entire classroom of adolescents ages 14 to 18 die every week in America.
What?
That's comparable to the...
Sorry, no, say that again.
An entire classroom. 22 students ages 14 to 18 die every week.
From fentanyl.
From fentanyl. 14 to 18-year-olds.
Oh my God.
The Xanax, in this addiction that you're talking about, this Xanax that he was taking was fentanyl laced.
Yes.
And I remember just talking with you about this story, and you just never know how much fentanyl they're placing on it because it's all done in, I mean, there's no regulation to the fentanyl laced.
Yeah,
So
you can get a pill press on Amazon, the binders, fillers, just 2 milligrams, which is just a few grains of salt, is a lethal amount. So just such a tiny amount, they're sprinkling it in, they're pressing their own pills, and
So they don't look like real Xanax pills that you would get through
They
a
do.
prescription.
No,
or
they
they
do.
do.
they look
They look just
identical.
like-
You
they
can't
look
even
just like
tell.
it.
Even
and the
people in
scary
labs.
thing is, I mean, I know at least 3 people whose children died one Xanax, touched it one time, took it one time. And the potency of this, like you said, there's no
there's
control.
no regulation.
You have no idea what you're taking.
Well, do they know that it's laced, or is it?
So some do, some don't. A lot of times, like Tucker started not knowing it was laced,
Okay.
and then that created an addiction. And fentanyl can be added to other things too. All illicit drugs, and you can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it. There's no way to determine if it's in there. It's been found in marijuana, in vapes, heroin, cocaine. Really, the drug demographic has changed so much that there really isn't any regular drugs that we once knew of.
Wow.
And how easy it is for them to access.
Yes, on social media. And that's another thing that I think it's important for parents to understand. These aren't adult drug dealers. Tucker's drug dealer was a teenage boy who had killed another boy 6 months before Tucker. And another 17-year-old 2 months after was given Narcan at the hands of this drug dealer. And that's another statistic to think about. He's now incarcerated for 13 years. That's another young boy who is making really dumb choices because of his drug addiction that has really big consequences.
Right. Just a couple weeks ago, they caught in the border in Arizona a young 20-year-old crossing the border with millions of pills of fentanyl that look like candy.
There's been enough pills to kill the whole entire United States multiple times. I mean,
So you, because of everything that you learned, you started Texans Against Fentanyl, and that's been extremely effective and powerful in this day and
Amazing,
age.
amazing what this woman has done in heightening awareness and saving other kids and families.
You know, it's really about transparency and being very vulnerable and real, because when you hear my story, then it's like, wow, this is how it happened. This is what it looks like. And you can start to understand better. And I am an easier story to tell would be my son took one pill one time he didn't know. Right? That seems more like he made one poor choice. And you're like, man, son, you've made multiple poor choices and now you're gone. But this is what it looks like. And I will never not talk about that, because it shows just how strong fentanyl is.
Well, tell us about Tucker's Bill, because that's something parents can look to that they can do in their own states.
Yeah, so what I found, I just wanted to talk about it. I wanted to get into my schools. I wanted my community to talk about it, and nobody wanted to. Nobody's talking about it, just like you guys don't know that a whole airplane is dying, that a whole classroom of kids are dying. And
do you think that's purposeful?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and also schools, they don't necessarily want to flag there's a problem here, but we're in a time right now where school administrators and staff are running around with naloxone around their neck or in their drawers on the lookout, having to administer it on campus.
Sure.
Kids are almost dying on campus, and parents are not getting the notification. And we are working on legislation for next session where we want schools to be required, if someone has been given Narcan, almost died from a poison that was on my child's campus, they need to tell the parents. We deserve to know.
Sure.
And what a great conversation that could be. Hey, today this happened at your school. This is what it looks like. This is what to be mindful of. These are good refusal skills. Do we know what that, to talk about that? But so that's what happened. I wanted to talk in the schools, and I was getting resistance, and we took it up with the Texas legislature, and we got Tucker's Law passed. It's House Bill 3908, and it requires schools to bring in fentanyl education.
That's good.
But this is what we learned. We thought, oh, good, the law will be here, and all the schools will have information.
Yeah, but there's no education.
There's no education.
What does she do? Creates a curriculum.
Yay! Because moms, when we find a problem, we understand that there needs to be a solution, and if there isn't one, we provide it, because that's just what we do.
It needed to be done, and really schools just didn't know what to do. So it was an unfunded mandate without knowledge, and it kind of created a little bit of a storm where schools are now trying to pull information. Maybe it's not fact-based, evidence-based information, and that's what we are working. So we're in multiple states now with the Tucker Project.
Wow.
And we pulled that aside, so that's its own 501c3. So we have the Texas Against Fentanyl, which is growing, and we really support families who have lost.
So now that you have Tucker's Law in other states, is it going to be American Moms Against Fentanyl?
We did think about that, and there were different states that wanted to launch it. And really through the Tucker Project, we are giving platforms to those who have lost and looking for when we go into communities with the Tucker Project where we partner with a family who has lost. Because, when you have a child, as a mother, you take on their DNA.
Yes.
And that's your DNA is forever changed, and you hold your child's DNA. And as a mother, when you lose a child, it is a link in your chain that is forever broken.
Yes.
And it will never be the same. And a lot of people feel just there's nothing left. It's just brokenness. Tucker's gone, and now what? But what I found through this work is if you can give them a platform and you can allow people to share their story and repurpose their pain, and I've watched time and time again, families get stronger, mothers get stronger, find their voice and realize that their story matters.
Yes.
Their child's life does matter.
And find a community where judgment will not be applied to them, right? Because a lot of those mothers feel like the world's gonna judge them. You didn't
And the world does.
educate the child, right?
Yes.
But then you find a
There's that
community
guilt.
groups, like support groups,
Yeah.
where other mothers have gone through the same thing, and they may not feel that judgment that they may feel in like a church, for example, the group of church, right? Like, well, you didn't talk about God enough in your house, right? Or stuff like that. And it's such a complex addiction. It's a very complex sickness that we're still not looking at it as a sickness, right?
Right.
And then there's the whole mom guilt. And I think your organization must be incredibly helpful with the mom guilt. We have so much guilt in so many areas.
We
And when something like that happens, the first thing we're going to do is internalize it.
It is. As a mom, my job was to keep my child safe, to educate him, to protect him, to love him, to build him up. And I failed. It wasn't enough. But fentanyl, it's a game changer. It really is.
Well, you're not really responsible for the choices he makes outside of your home, and so I think that's a little silver lining there, a little bit. Not really silver lining, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say here. It's not. I want to make you feel like that it's not your fault, right? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Well, and as kids, we make decisions. I made decisions as a kid that I will never make as an adult.
Right.
And we learn from them. That's part of it. We have our prefrontal cortex in our brain, which makes decision making. It's not even fully formed until we're 25.
25,
Well, they're
26.
taking these kids away before that prefrontal lobe is even established, and so they're making poor decisions, and we're doing the best that we can to help them. But I think that Tucker's project would be extremely helpful to empower those moms who do feel that loss of and guilt, because they're connecting with other moms who can lift each other up. I think what you're doing is just absolutely amazing.
And to take this model legislation too and share that across the country, because if it's in a couple of states now, it needs to be nationwide. Across the country.
Yep, there's more states that have it filed now, and there's more movement.
Did you just say you were just somewhere talking about the legislation just recently?
We did get it passed in Alabama, and then the goal with the Tucker Project is where we work from the states down. So where we partner with state superintendents, and we provide this information for schools to have it for free, right? So schools have this information where they can bring these quality lessons into their cross-curricular teaching already. So making it very easy just for schools to bring this information.
I would also like our government to have more awareness of how open our border is for all these drugs to flow in, right? So after the break, another mom of 4 tells her story of drug addiction and a miraculous recovery. We'll be right back.
We've all heard the old saying, every vote counts, right? Well, maybe you think your vote couldn't possibly make a difference. Maybe you think your one vote is insignificant or irrelevant. You are not insignificant, and your one vote can have a huge impact. Moms like us care deeply about our children and grandchildren. Our culture, our values, the economy, and our freedoms are all extremely important to us. As moms, we must be engaged. We need to vote our values. Yes, every vote does count. And when we unite our one vote with the votes of moms all across the country, it's no longer just an election. It's a movement.
Being raised in a Christian home with supportive parents did not prevent Sarah Love from getting addicted to meth. It started with a desire to lose a few pounds, but she could have lost her family, her freedom, and her life. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
So I just want to say how thrilled I am to have you on the set. I met Sarah a few months ago, and we just went to have lunch. And she just, I don't know, we just connected, and she started telling me her story, and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to talk about this, because we heard the story from the perspective of the mom. Mm-hmm. This is the story from the perspective of the daughter. Yeah. Now you're kind of thinking what you put your mom through.
I regret a lot of things I did.
So how you're raised in a Christian home? Wasn't your dad a pastor?
Yes, my dad was a pastor.
So how does that happen? And people think it only happens in inner cities or in poor homes or whatever. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah, because the devil's still the devil, and he's still after. He wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And for me, my dad, he pastored until I was 12, and he started to get really sick, and he became a full-time dialysis patient. He had 11 stents in his heart. He had a pacemaker in his chest. And when he stopped pastoring, it caused me to go actually to this little church in Ennis, Texas. And that's where I would meet my husband when I was 12, and got into the youth group. And up until 15, I am going to that church. And then 15, I had to get a job. And 16, I had to get another job so I could have a car and all those things. And then 17, one of my best friends asked me if I wanted to lose weight. And I told her yes. And I didn't know what she was going to give me that time. And anyway, she brought some meth over and we tried it. And I didn't know I had an addictive personality. She walked away that weekend and I was hooked. And I started doing it every day. I was like, you know, when you get desperate and your pipe breaks and you're rolling up in toilet paper eating it, I was doing that. And my mom and dad knew something was wrong with me. You start to look like you're on drugs and you start to act like you're on drugs. And I've told lots of people the only way that I can describe being on drugs is like walking into a casino where there's no windows for a reason. So your time gets lapsed. And it's like your night becomes day and your day becomes night. And that's what it became. And I stopped going to school. I dropped out. And
how many years was this?
Almost 19 years ago. Yeah. Oh, wow. And like one day I'm outside in my car. I had thought I spilt my drugs in the floorboard. And I was out there for 4 hours. And my mom comes outside and she said, "Sarah, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking for something." She goes, "Are you on something? Because like this isn't normal." And I was like, no, you know. And eventually, like, her and my dad figured out that I was on something. And she's like, "You're not staying here." And because as for me and my house, we're serving the Lord. And she told me later on that was the hardest day of her life, was to have me leave. But when you love your sin, you easily leave. And so I didn't really have anywhere to go. I had a friend, and he was the drug dealer. And his name was Angel. And I went over there, I laid on the couch, and I remember eating just like whatever came through. I had like $400 left, and I was going to make a drug deal and maybe double my money on that $400. And so one day I'm over there, and I haven't done it yet. And he just looked at me and he said, "Sarah," he said, "why are you here?" I was like, "I don't know." And he goes, "You don't want to end up like me. You have a better life ahead of you." And I remember thinking in that moment, is my mom and dad praying? Because I'm feeling there's like this tug that's going on. I know what I was doing was wrong. But I had to wait because I have to wait for, I don't know. I didn't know what I was waiting on because I didn't know how to get out of the mess I had got myself into. You know, you dig a hole and how do you get out? Right. And so my mom worked at Walmart down in Corsicana, Texas. And my best friend and her mom go down to Corsicana and to see my mom and see how I was doing. And my mom, Paula asked my mom, she said, "How's Sarah doing?" And my mom just broke down and started crying. And she said, "I don't know, but she's at a drug dealer's house and she's hooked on meth. And I don't know what to do." And so my friend, he had came over to Angel's house, and he said, "There's a woman waiting at your mom's house for you. Her name's Paula." And I got really scared that she'd come over there because she had like a sergeant type personality. And so I got really scared. I got into the car with them. I go back to my mom and dad's house, and all my stuff's in this black trash bag that I had left at my mom's house. And Paula looked at me and she said, "Sarah, what have you done?" I said, "I don't know." She goes, "You're leaving Corsicana, you're not coming back." And I just said, okay. Like when you've hit rock bottom, you have no other way but up. And I go with them, I get in the car, and I go with them out back to Ennis, Texas, which is just a couple towns over. And we go to church. The next service, I don't know what the pastor preached. I ran down to that altar, I gave my life back to God, and I never went back.
You were immediately delivered.
I was immediately delivered.
Oh my gosh.
I was on fire for the Lord. And now this is where my husband is that I had met when I was 12. He's there at this church again. Wow. Yes. And now I'm on fire for God. And this is what you do in hillbilly churches. You get auctioned off to raise money for a missions trip. And so me and my best friend, we go up first, and my husband yells out $25 to clean his house. And yes.
So this is a fundraiser.
This is a fundraiser for our missions trip that we're raising money for.
So funny.
And he calls me up and he said, "I didn't really buy you to clean my house. I bought you going on a date with." Oh. I was so excited. I got off the phone. I was screaming. And 13 weeks later, we got married.
Wow.
Yes, and God gave me that last name, Love, for a reason. Like, there was this reminder that He loves us and He has a great plan. And that scripture in Jeremiah 29:11 that says, "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. It marked me. That day that I got saved, it marked my life.
What
and
a story.
Yeah, God can do it. It's, I was thinking of that epidemic. There is an epidemic, but there's a cure, and we carried the cure. And not many go around and really share Jesus, and I think of that, when I was younger, I wish I would have had that boldness to share Jesus with my friends, because you feel alone. Like even me when I was younger as a teenager, I was scared to talk about the Lord with my friends. You feel like an outcast. But if we have some ones that aren't afraid of the gospel, I don't know, we might have a different gen coming up that might not be ashamed of the gospel, and let them know that they have the same Holy Spirit that we do when we receive Jesus. And so, I don't know, there's something great, I think.
And also, your parents never gave up praying.
No,
that's
important.
And there's something broken, like very, very broken in our society today. And it's the disconnect between who you really are and who you can be. And they're lost. There's so much being lost. And you felt that. I'm lost. I don't fit in here.
Yes.
And I think that's why kids are turning to something else. And it's not even just drugs. I mean, there are so many things that are addictive, whether it's pornography or the games that they're
Filling
on.
the hole.
It's filling the emptiness. They're trying to fill the
sadness.
Yes. There's a God-sized hole inside of us.
That's it.
And we fill it with the things of this world, but there's only one thing we can reach for these things, but the only thing is Jesus.
My daughter, my youngest daughter, was talking to me about she keeps talking about how she feels like she's missing something, and for whatever reason, it's TikTok and all that stuff. She moved away from everything that we taught her, and it's not just about political beliefs or principles that we established in the home. She's turned away from God.
Yeah.
And when we pray, she'll go in the other room, but she loves her family and she's always connected with us. And she's always talking about how she's missing something.
Yeah.
And one day she told my other daughter, she goes, "I know, it's the beach." And I'm like, I don't think
not
that's
that, baby.
But it's really hard to we just love her to death and hope that eventually she'll realize what that hole is. We just keep, surrounding her with love. And I think as a mother, it had to have been the hardest thing that she did when she said, "You can't stay here." She's protecting her other children, but at the same time, she never let go.
Stephanie?
Never let go.
Yeah, I couldn't have Tucker at her house. I didn't want to risk having our other daughters be in a situation of finding him or that. And, I just say, you can't stay here because I can't risk that. And it is so painful. It is so hard. But also, if you think about kids, they have access to so much right now.
Right.
It's at their fingertips. I mean, us too. We have social media and text messaging, and they go to school and they're still on their phones. They don't have a time to just be.
Right.
And it is something that I'm mindful of when I see my teenage daughter. I have a junior. When she's starting to kind of like be a little frazzled, I'll tell her, "I need you to go and be with your heart." Go back and turn that off and listen to, turn off the noise. And that helps them come back to center of God gave us our hearts and our compass in life. And we have to go back into that compass.
So Sarah, you have children now.
Yes.
What has your experience done to change the way that you parent?
I try not to shove Jesus down their throat because I want them to have their own encounter with the Lord. But they know my testimony. And so I've never hid that from them. And I wanted them to know that I was just as human. We all make mistakes. But God is a redeeming God. And there's nothing too far gone for God. And so you can hit rock bottom, but you will find that He's the rock at the bottom. And so that's so true. I realize that was on my daughter's screensaver, but
That's so good. That's good. That's so good.
So, anyways, but yeah. So I think
What's your message to the moms that are watching too. I love both of you to share
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Because you're coming from one perspective, you're coming from another. What would you say to maybe just advice or encouragement? Because this is touching everyone.
Yeah.
In some way, everyone.
Or in many ways.
Yeah. I would say the greatest treasure you can give your children is Jesus. I mean, if it wasn't for the Lord, I don't know where I would have been. If it wasn't for a praying mama, I don't know where I would have been. So I would say don't give up. Press on. Even if you're struggling in your own walk with God, you cover those children in prayer. And that's the greatest treasure you can give them. I can say you can give them all these things, but it doesn't satisfy. You know, they're gonna. My dad, you know, he passed away when I was 21, so he got to see my whole life turned around. And I will tell you, the greatest treasure he gave me was the Lord, because it's what sustains me in my life now. So,
but God.
Yeah, but God.
Stephanie, what do you want to counsel? Do you want to give to me? Warnings, counsel.
Just never think not my child. You know, there's such people think like I don't need to talk to my kids about that. That won't happen to them. Like, you know, we set up at an event and people walk by and like, oh, I don't need to learn about fentanyl. Well, but you do, because you understand that your kids can have access to it at their fingertips. So pull back all the judgment and stigma behind it, and get that education and educate them and have those hard conversations with them.
And I think if we can maybe use fentanyl as a pathway to all of those discussions, whatever it is that you're going after to fill that hole, alcohol, drugs, whatever, it can help us open the door to hard questions. Because if we actually, as crazy as this sounds, fentanyl is almost kind of a gift, because now we can say, no, we're trying to protect you. Let me tell you how dangerous this is. And then maybe they'll be a lot more cautious and not go in that direction at all.
Right. Like, you know, Nancy Reagan did the Just Say No campaign. Could never be more true than now.
Right.
That this is an illicit poison. If kids can understand that there's a poison added to all of these substances, then you can't take a risk because it could be your life. That's a different conversation. Tucker never would have tried heroin, and he tried a pill because he thought it was safe. And you said it earlier in the program where you were talking about New Zealand and America. We advertise medications, and so
You think it's safe?
Yep.
You think it's something that was created to help mankind, it should be safe.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you're getting it from a trusted friend or a trusted family member or
right.
someone. You think that,
Or like,
why would they hurt you? You
People
know?
are making it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a cheap man's drug. And,
Right.
so there's, again, it's the culture. It's how do we help the kids
This is-
know
this
their
is-
value and their worth.
Thank you so much for being with us on this show. Such a heartfelt story. We'll be right back with more at the Mom View.
What kind of America do you want to leave future generations? What do you want America to look like for your children and your grandchildren? Our nation is at a crossroads, and it will be us, the mothers of America, who will determine the future of our country. What we teach and nurture in the hearts of our children and how we vote will make all the difference. If you love God, respect life, honor family, and cherish freedom, then use your voice and be heard. We teach these values in our home. Let's secure them with our vote.
Welcome back to the Mom View. Now let's hear some solutions.
You know, the first solution that I think is extremely important is awareness. And one of the things that I found that literally shocked me in 2022, again, this is all the information and data that they got in 2022, is that the highest death rate was in West Virginia. And so you think, oh, this is only happening in Arizona or Texas, or no, this is everywhere. So it was, West Virginia was first, Maine and Tennessee were second.
Oh my God. It's really interesting. I'd really wonder how they're testing, because that's an issue too, how they're identifying these poisonings and labeling them. And that, I wonder if those states, what their testing procedures
These are just the deaths. This is the concentration of deaths.
But sometimes, like in Texas, they don't always do that 16-point panel. and it doesn't get labeled.
I see.
So there's a lot of
Very
reporting.
interesting.
There's a lot of data we don't know.
There really is. And I think it's important that we understand we're all having to learn what this looks like. Law enforcement are having to learn how to work these scenes. Sometimes law enforcement don't even know how to identify how do we keep a scene safe and after when we show up on a death. And then recovery centers are having to figure out how do we treat people with fentanyl addiction. And educators are having to learn how do we teach about it. Parents are having to learn. So it's across the board, everyone. And I really think we need a COVID-like response. When we had COVID, we were testing. They were labeling someone who had a heart attack a COVID death. We were really doing all that. We need a COVID-like response. We need to be tracking this so much better.
You have such a wealth of information on your website.
I was just going to say, too, a wealth of information on the website, but one of the things you wanted to mention is how lethal this is and how you've got a really good thing to show us here with the sugar packet, a visual. Yeah. I just have here that on the tip of a pencil, that's 2 milligrams is lethal. Just the tip of a pencil of fentanyl. And again, how authentic these pills look. They look like Xanax. These are not copycats. They're copycats.
And it's not just using Xanax, they're lacing it on all kinds of drugs now.
Yeah, even pharmacists can't tell the difference between a prescribed pill and
that's scary.
Yeah.
So show us what this looks like.
Here 2 milligrams, what does that look like? But one packet of sugar, if we were to dump it out, do you guys know how many people that could kill? One packet here.
How many? I'd say a lot.
500 people. So it can be transported so easily. It's just a little bit can go a long way. And a big moneymaker. We were talking about the cartels. It's $1 billion, billions of dollars. Yeah.
Incredible strength and incredibly addictive.
Absolutely.
That's very easy to bring to the country. Very easy. Why? Because we have open borders, right?
Yeah.
We're making it even easier. Right.
You were talking about how this came about from China to Mexico, the cartels, and then to here. Can you show that again?
Yeah, a lot of times people view when they hear fentanyl, they think overprescribing. Where when we went through that whole generation where there was pill mills and overprescribing of narcotics. And through doctors who were making a lot of money. And what happened is the federal government came in, they stepped in and they put regulations on these. And now you can't get a unregulated prescription at another pharmacy. You're tracking your data on that. And what happened is those who were addicted to prescription medication turned to street drugs, and that's heroin. It's in that same family, opioids. And so that was what happened when the heroin epidemic hit in the 90s or early 2000s. And then what China did, it's a great model for a business model. China's doing a really good job looking at a business aspect. A lot of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. Right. And then China just started sending the chemical precursors, so the same makeup that they used to make these drugs, to the Mexican cartel. And then they started manufacturing it. And then the open border, we're not talking about it like our borders are. Who is our borders are? Who's looking at that?
We have no one looking.
No one. Yeah.
Tell us about the website and some of the specific information that you have on there. You have guidance and recommendations for parents and what to watch for, what to do.
On Texas Against Fentanyl's website, txaf.org, we have a lot of information, and a thing that we found really important is refusal skills. How do kids know what to say in an environment of, do you want to try this? And who is your person? What's your backup plan? Have we walked through that? Do you have someone you can call? I mean, my kids know they can always blame my mom. Yes, always blame it. But those are role-playing situations. And we know kids are still using marijuana and alcohol as well, and that is a factor if they might make a decision under the influence of something else that they maybe wouldn't make without the education. So there's a ton of information for parents to learn about it and for people to share their stories as well.
That's awesome. Can you give the website again?
txaf.org.
For Texans Against Fentanyl. TSAF.
TX.
Yeah.
Oh,
TX because Texas.
Okay, I was like,
Yes,
this is not
So is all of your model legislation on there as well, so we can take that and present that to other places?
We haven't gotten it up there yet.
Okay.
It has been like drinking from a fire hydrant because there's so many areas, and I work with law enforcement as well. So when they show up on a scene in our area, if there's a death, I go and be with the parents at that time.
Wow.
And that has been very powerful because it is so important for parents to understand what is happening. And law enforcement, they're not trained in how to handle a grieving parent. That's a painful thing. So that's a big part of. We have condolence cards where law enforcement give those to those who have lost, so they can contact us and be a part of it, and then also help to create future legislation. I mean, we have to look at this across the board. But I mentioned earlier on about a whole airplane crashing every day. To think that I had to go get a law to educate others. If a plane was crashing, Boeing would quit making, like there would be regulations. No one would be flying.
Not now. Boeing's having issues and not everybody's talking about it. And when you do talk about it, you're kind of canceled or the information is being stifled and you're not allowed to share it. So I think that might be why most people don't know about this crisis, is because of the failures in leadership that we currently have and the failures of our current administration. Is they don't want this information out because they are purposely keeping it open because we are experiencing what I like to call death by 1,000 cuts. We're being attacked by so many different things on so many different levels, and families are so overwhelmed they just don't know what to do. And so having you on, both of you, explaining your stories and your testimonies is so powerful, and what you're doing, we're just so grateful to have you here and to express that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for using your voice and sharing your heart. I don't know what else to
And
say
for giving
besides
hope.
that.
Yes, hope is so important.
Moms,
Absolutely.
right? Because that's what we're all about at the Mom View. We want moms to feel hopeful. We want moms to know that there's a place where they will find a place. That I know many of you on today's show find yourself related to what's happening in America, to what's happening in many families. And that's what we're hoping that you get from this show. To find a place where you will find solutions, you will find a group, you will find your comadres, we'll say in Spanish. You will find friends, and that is the Mom View. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you here next time.